Welcome back to Talking Story. My name is John Minton, and I've got a complete review for you today. It is not a spooky season for me, especially if there's a new Stephen King book without having a Stephen King read for spooky season. This year, Holly had come out. I slotted it in for a spooky season read, and I have a full review for you today. This is an interesting book. He swung for the fences, I feel, on this. There are times when we all go through something. We all go through something like we did at the beginning of this decade in the 2020s, that lockdown time, that time of plague that we all lived through and for very much still living through. It really left a mark. It really did something. And oftentimes it's not until our artists and in our art starts reflecting that time back to us, are we able to process and understand? And he absolutely went for that feel, a bit of a time capsule book of that time. Did it succeed for me? Did it work for me on that level? This artist that we are so established in thinking of fun pop culture, was he able to swing for the fences and actually do that? We're going to get into it. My reviews work on a classic 5-star system. We're going to look at 5 different categories: world building, plot, characters, pace, and prose. And each category can score between a quarter star all the way up to a full star. And at the end, I'm going to attempt to do a little math without a pencil, just using my fingers and brain. And that's going to be my final score, what I thought about the book. So let's get right into Stephen King's Holly with world building. This is absolutely our world. He goes out of his way over and over again to make sure that we understand this is a time capsule book. This is his meditations on what we've been through, wrapped up into a thriller. And it is 100% our world, not his multiversal world. This is the world that started in the Bill Hodges trilogy, but it's absolutely our world, our socio-political systems, the times we all went through at the beginning of this decade. Everything is there in force. He's absolutely trying to reflect back to us as an artist what we've been through, what it meant to us, and to mark that time, all the while telling an engaging thriller. Does he succeed at that? To a large extent, absolutely yes. Are we as an artist willing to give him that opportunity? Has it been enough time? Has there been enough water under that bridge for some of us as an audience to go, I'm ready to reflect and go back and look at that? From the reviews I've seen, maybe not for everyone. Absolutely not. For others, yes. So it's kind of a mixed bag. Does he absolutely do it for me? He misses the mark here or there. Now, I don't get caught up in the aspect of the actual lockdown time, because I do remember that time, and I do remember what being on the tip of everyone's tongue was. Marking time in a way of asking those questions. Have you been vaccinated? Have you not? Has it hit your family? Has it not? Those were the first things out of all of our mouths whenever we spoke to any of us, any of our peers, friends, family, acquaintances. And I did not find it to be browbeating or beating me over the head with that bit, because I remember it being so all-encompassing, ever-present in my life of that period. And I do think he has the right to stretch himself as a writer and do that type of time capsule book and try to reflect back to us as an artist and help us understand what we all went through and what we're still going through. I love it when someone stretches himself, swings for the fences, and does something beyond what they're known for doing. And this is not just a pop culture thriller fun ride. He actually is trying to do that. So I'm all for it. And I did not think it was browbeating. I did not think it was over the top, because in my experiences, that is what happened. Where I do think it fell short for me is it did not go far enough. As an artist, I remember things about that time walking around. I remember it filtered all the way down in my town here, in my existence in my town, all the way down to the litter. I started noticing cast off masks along the sides of the street or in parking lots. It changed the actual litter of my town, and I started to wonder about what faces those masks came off of. If those faces were still with us, he didn't go there. Some of the compulsions of our lead character, Holly, and I absolutely buy her going through this time, compulsively cleaning her hands. It was never touched that it was not easy to get hand cleaner. It was not easy to go into a store and find everything you needed on those shelves. So there was, as far as a time capsule reflecting back to us, I don't think he went far enough to reflect back to me of what I remember about that time. So I'm just going to give a quarter off for world building. To a large extent, I do think he captured what we all went through. I do think, and I respect him as an artist for taking that swing to be that type of artisan that reflects back to us our shared experience at the beginning of this decade. So I am just going to take, because I don't think he went far enough, I am just going to take a quarter star off for world building and give it 3/4 star. Now, plot. Let's get into plot. Like I said, this is that reflecting back time capsule wrapped into a thriller. This is very much a thriller. I'm not going to say it's a murder mystery because it operates in the same way that Stephen King does with a lot of his books. Stephen King operates this way in Mr. Mercedes. He operates this way in Misery. We know who the bad person is, and we get to spend the entire book delving into their darker psyche. He's not the only type of thriller writer that does this. Another one that comes to mind is Harris with Red Dragon and Buffalo Bill. When we know who it is. It's just the two paths of the White Knight chasing that dragon coming together. So we do get to spend the entire book delving into the darker psyche. Now, he had to do this, I think, for one of his main themes, which I'll cover in character. So I do think it's very successful as a thriller. I did find it very successful as a thriller. It was very compulsively readable. The one thing that I will say regarding plot is it slowed down a little bit for me in that when we got towards the end, some of the intellectual leaps Holly was able to take is to put all the pieces together. Seemed a little convenient to me, seemed a little bit maybe not entirely earned. They just kind of fell into her lap. And for that, I didn't have that leap of Holmesian detection. It was just like, it just came to her. I just didn't buy it completely when it was wrapping up at the end and she was putting all the pieces together. It just clinked for me. It just left a little hollow sound for me. And because of that for plot, and it very much just the plot, I'm going to be very vague. Holly, the character that we meet in the Bill Hodges trilogy, she is now off on her own, running the Finders Keepers detective agency. She gets sent onto a missing persons case by a mother whose daughter has disappeared, and she starts finding that it's been a long line of missing people around this college campus, and she starts putting the pieces together of a serial murdering duo. And I don't want to go deeper than that because it's such a delicious ride of finding out these people are so different than the regular type of serial that we get in books like this. And I found that to be really delicious. So I don't want to go any deeper than that. But I'm going to go plot 3/4 just for that wrap up at the end. I didn't quite think all the breadcrumbs lined up for her to be able to make the intellectual leaps of solving it by the end. So there we go. 3/4 star for plot. Character. Come on, it's Stephen King. You know we love these characters. Holly, even if you feel, because of it's that time capsule feel of a book and it's reflecting back a time you don't want reflected to you, you absolutely have to root for her. Even if you feel her compulsion sets you up on a different side of what you may believe, you still have to root for her. The villains are absolutely delicious and delightful. And you get to check in on some of the other characters that you've known and met all the way going back to the Bill Hodges trilogy of Barbara and Jerome. And there's some amazing things there. So what I want to cover in character is what I think was one of his strongest themes that he was able to pull off with this book. as far as it being that time capsule reflective piece of work. In these characters, you will find that because of the time and place, you'll immediately start to think about this juxtaposition that happens in the book. Oh my God, these villains are so out there. Who could ever get themselves intellectually, because they are highly educated, been around the block, don't want to give too much away. How could they ever think these things? How could they ever believe this of their victims, that their victims are just something for their own edification, just meat bags, just something to be used? He's able, through character, to juxtapose that with where we all were, and a lot of us where we still are in this time of 2020, where we are not only locked down to secure ourselves from germs, we are locked down in our ideologies, and we are locked down in our own bubbles of what it is we believe. And those that do not believe what we believe are dehumanized and thought of as other, to the point that we no longer value their opinion. They're not someone to be understood, compromised with, found common ground with, valued whatsoever. They're someone to be dehumanized to a point where they are a problem and we should wipe them away. So we find ourselves, by delving into character at this point in time of the lockdown era, we find ourselves through a juxtaposition like this, actually sympathizing and understanding the psychology of these vile villains that see humanity as nothing more than meat. I found this to be the strongest part of the book, and this theme to play out in truly a deft way that was not didactic, that was not preachy, it was just layered in there in a way that it creeped to the surface and you didn't really catch that it was happening to you until it did. And I thought, for me, this, because of his character work is so strong, he was able to use these themes to show ourselves our own shortcomings and fallacies of character. I thought was absolutely phenomenal and top-notch character. 1 star. I wish I could do more for that reason. Let's move on to pace. Was he able to wrap this in a thriller that moved and was engaging and was satisfying, except for that little bit that I took off on plot? Absolutely. This was compulsively readable to me. I blew through this, I believe, in like 3 days, maybe somewhere around there. King, if nothing else, is just, I've never DNF'd a Stephen King book because you can't. He's compulsively readable. Even if the story doesn't speak to you, there's something in there that makes you just keep going. I'm not sure if in this paper fiber it's interwoven with some type of bizarre drug, but he just understands our psyche, particularly in this country, I think, because he is of us. He understands what makes us tick and what our gestalt is overall, living this existence in this country together, that just speaks to us on a level that it's almost indescribable. It's almost, and even though it's strange to say, because this is, again, the villains are vile, it's a thriller, it's out there, but I was talking to Josh at Red Fury Books through comments. It's still a comfort read because it's Stephen King. It's us. He's one of us. You still can't help but connect to it on that visceral level because he understands who we are and where we come from and what drives us so well. So the pace, I cannot take one iota off. It just moved just relentlessly on rails. Pace, full star. So that just leaves us with prose. Where do I think Stephen King hits it with prose? Now, to me, Stephen King vacillates on prose. Sometimes he's always actually a very lunch pail writer. He is very well known for being prolific. He hits the chair every day and he punches in and he does his work. He brings his lunch pail. He does his work. He is a lunch pail guy. That's how he operates. And I fully and totally respect that. Sometimes he's operating on a level of even though he's dealing with unsavory characters and thrillers, he operates on a level of beauty in his language. Sometimes he's just punching the clock and getting a story out because to not get a story out would be no longer living for him. And the language sometimes is just serviceable. It's beautiful. It tells a story. It moves. It does everything you want it to do. And sometimes it operates higher on these themes I talked about earlier that I thought worked absolutely wonderfully. But it's there's not an actual beauty to the words. There's not an actual. Some of the Dark Tower I had to go back and reread a couple times because that's a beautiful way to look at that. I didn't find that in this book. I just found this a storyteller hitting a stump next to a campfire telling me, I got a story for you. And I was enwrapped. But the prose itself, I don't think it's one of his finest outings with soaring language or things that I had to read twice and make me contemplate what he was doing with language. So I think his prose has been better. I think this is not one of his tippity top examples of prose. So I'm going to take a quarter off and go prose 3/4 star. Just because I'm comparing it to his past work. So let's do some math on that. Where are we at with Holly, Stephen King's Holly? That puts us as a 4.25. So where would I put this? Anything over a 4 for me. Favorite. I'm glad I have it on my shelf. I would not take this down and trade it at a half price book or anything. I do feel like this belongs on my Stephen King shelf. Anything pushing 5, like he has done with some other pieces, I feel will stand the test of time long after Stephen King and I have moved on to Dusty Death. He will still be looked at, possibly even in more value than he is when he's alive. But I don't think this is one of those, but I do think that this is a darn fine thriller, and I do think this is an amazing swing at the fences by an author who is known by doing something, and he wanted to do a little bit more in this thriller. He wanted to be that artist that marks time for all of us after what we've been through collectively and reflect back to us and maybe try and help us grow and understand what it is we've been through. So for that, I will say fair play to you, Mr. King. I'm so happy that at this age, this point of your career, you are finding ways to challenge yourself and stretch yourself. I find that humbling in my own artistic endeavors. I will try to take it to heart, sir, and mimic you. So there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning in to Talking Story. My name has been John Minton, and you don't have to pick up and read Holly if it doesn't sound like it's your cup of tea, but absolutely do pick up and read something. We'll see you back here soon on Talking Story.